free agency is humming and NFL draft markets are moving rapidly as teams sign and release different players. Today, we'll break down the impact of free agency on NFL draft markets and go through the top 10 picks, the latest news, and so much more. Welcome to Move the Line, NFL Draft Season Edition. I'm Connor Allen, taking over the hosting reins from Ryan Noonan, who is off on his annual golf trip, hopefully shooting a little bit better than last year. Last year, I think he lost narrowly, as he did not let us forget multiple times. So hopefully he's doing a little bit better there. Joining me, as always, Scott Smith, one of the most accurate mock drafters over the past decade. Scott, how'd the legal tampering period treat you? I mean, is it as glorious as always?
Hey, as a Washington fan and dealing with Dan Snyder era for the last 20 plus years, it's been phenomenal for me actually seeing them put together a decent roster. It's always telling whenever you have a team that goes ahead and doesn't sign any of their free agents, but then nobody else does either. So
we'll talk about it more. It's like them and the Titans have just been like, I don't know who they think they are. Like they're just signing guys who are, tons of guys that they're in like a win now mode, but I don't think that they're really there. So we'll see. But joining us today is our friend, one of the Twitter gambling godfathers, Vegas Refund. Vegas Refund. How have you been, my man?
We're good. We're going. This is the first draft season I'll be going through with a newborn, so it's a little bit different, but
dude, congrats on that. That's it's massive news. Baby VR, baby Refund.
Fun sooner.
Yeah, no, well, that's awesome. So I'm thinking today we'll probably go through just the top picks and then some of the latest news and how those impact the top picks. There's obviously some other free agency news that might impact some of the later picks in the first round as well that we can probably touch on. But I think off the top here, we got to get your opinion on the whole Bears, Justin Fields. Like, just to kick it off, are the Bears locked in on Caleb Williams, Luke? Or, and if so, like, where does Justin Fields go? When does he get traded?
Yeah, I mean, Caleb's going one. I don't even think it's worth talking about anymore.
Kind of agree.
Any show that's even talking about Caleb going one is just wasting their time. But yeah, I mean, Justin Fields is, no one really knows. Everyone, I think his market in terms of the media, it was a lot higher in like January. Everyone expecting him to get traded. And now everything you're hearing is there's just no market whatsoever. And at this point, really, I'm not even, I mean, Caleb's going one either way, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the draft on what's happening with Justin Fields. But 2 and 3, I mean, I think Jaden and Drake are just flip-flopping. It seems like on a week-to-week basis, with Drake being the consensus number 2 pick for probably a year now. And now it's starting to get to Jaden, which I think I saw the odds on Jaden became the favorite number 2 yesterday. And I know Scott's working hard trying to figure out either or. And I think Scott still feels like Drake's number 2, which honestly I'm 50-50. And at the same time, like, I don't really care that much. What I care about is if it is Jaden at 2, like you do hear that like Drake could fall further than we expect. Like that's really all I'm looking for. Because if it's Caleb, Jaden, Drake, Caleb, Drake, Jaden, unless – I mean, the odds aren't even that enticing at this point for either or. Those 3 go first 3, just figuring out what happens after Marvin, or number 4, what happens at number 4 pick.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Scott, I think this is where we disagree a little bit. So we're looking at the Commanders here at number 2. Recently signed Marcus Mariota. Some are pointing to that as a sign that they're going to draft Jaden Daniels. Definitely some more comparisons there. And I think you have a good rebuttal to that, though. And I think you're still in the Drake May side here, but it's obviously far from decided. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on why you're still on Drake May over Jaden Daniels here. Daniels now we're looking at like minus 150, I believe, to be the number 2 overall pick.
So I will admit there, where there's smoke, there usually is some fire, and a lot of people are kind of like jumping the bandwagon to be on the Jaden Daniels side. There is some valid reasoning for that. There's been some rumors out there, whether true or not, that that Adam Peters may not even like, Jaden Daniels. So there's a lot of things on both sides of the fence. For me, I think the signing of Mariota isn't as much of an indictment against May as what a lot of people are saying, because they were also in on a few other backup quarterbacks that aren't in the same mold of what Jaden Daniels is. Everything they've done from a free agency signing is consistent and par for the course with what they're looking to do. If you start to look at it, Brian Johnson, who was with the Eagles, coached Mariota last year, is familiar with him as far as the system. He's a good guy to have in the room. If they are going to go ahead and move Sam Howell, he would kind of be the primary backup. You would want somebody that's familiar with the system. You start looking at the other guys. You had a few guys that came over from the Dallas, from the Cowboys to Washington that are familiar with the system. Eckler is familiar with Anthony Lynn, who was his head coach there when he was with the Chargers. So the Mariota signing, just because you're trying to, fit apples to apples and say that he's a similar quarterback to what Jaden Daniels' skill set, I don't necessarily buy that, because they were in on Sam Darnold as well, who Adam Peters is familiar with from San Francisco, and he's not anywhere close to being in the mold of what Jaden Daniels is. So that isn't necessarily the direction that I think that signing points them into. Now, what I would be a little bit more concerned about is that you do have some insiders. Tony Pauline's a guy that I listen to a lot. He seems to think that it's Jaden Daniels, and a number of other people have said that the arguments and discussions around the league isn't whether or not it's going to be Daniels or Drake May. It's that Jaden Daniels is up there competing with Caleb Williams. Not that Caleb Williams isn't going to be the first pick, but that some people think he's as much of a threat defensively and respect him as far as having to game plan against what he brings to the NFL. So those are the things that would start to kind of like bring me down and really like go through this. But there's still a lot of connections for Drake May there to Washington. You still have guys like Matt Hasselbeck that, he thinks Drake May is the best quarterback, even above Caleb Williams. And then you really have to start to wonder, everybody talks about, well, Drake May kind of took a step back. Well, he did change offenses. He did lose some of the weapons that he had the year before. But is Drake May's 2023 film worse than Jaden Daniels' 2022 film? Jaden Daniels took a step up. He had a great year. He's, surrounded by weapons, did play in the SEC. So it's good to see him do it against that caliber. But ultimately, I think what you really have to look forward to, and that's where I'm trying to like run down some of this stuff, is there's been multiple reports and whispers and rumors out there that Adam Peters prefers Drake May, and that's what it's going to come down to. So it's really trying to chase down some of those, and I still think that the tipping point for who this pick is going to come down to is going to come from Peter Schrager, because he was well connected with Cliff Kingsbury whenever he was there in Arizona. I think every year that Kingsbury was a coach down there, Schrager nailed the Arizona pick, and that's who I think is going to be the person that kind of tips who this pick is going to be for Washington.
Yeah, I think that when Schrager's first mock comes out, we're going to see the odds of whoever he puts there go to minus 180 or something like that, whether that's Daniels, whether that's Drake May. And you referenced some people discussing that the Commanders prefer Peters. I think that it's notable that in an athletic column where they poll GMs and executives, they polled 6 of them for the number 2 overall pick. 5 of them would have picked Jaden Daniels. 1 of them picked Drake May, but they did say in there, we've heard that Adam Peters prefers Drake May. Again, the only pick that matters is the Washington Commanders. So I think that's still kind of a TBD scenario with Washington there. And I think it rolls into number 3 though, VR. Do you think that the Pats are willing to just stand pat and take almost sloppy thirds? Do they think that they're fine with any of those 3 quarterbacks, or do they have a clear preference, and if they don't get their guy, they're going to trade down? I mean, where are your thoughts on number 3 right now?
I mean, God, I hope so.
You're a Pats guy, aren't you?
Yeah, the Brissett signing was very interesting. Whether they're looking at him as to be the starter next year or a starter as a bridge, you do feel like they like Jaden a lot more. For me, I'm defaulting to the Pats taking a quarterback, and we don't have Belichick there, so it's not like you have no idea what they're doing. You expect them to trade. There are definitely some trade partners, and I hate talking trades. I say it every single year. But right now, I'm just assuming that it's Drake May or Jaden. Sloppy seconds of the 2. And that's what they should do. And I mean, I love the Brissett signing, but right now there really aren't any tea leaves out there to kind of read in terms of what they're doing at 3. You kind of just got to assume it's a quarterback. I do not think it's JJ McCarthy. That's for sure, though.
Yeah, I think that I'm kind of glad that we're putting that to bed, or early-ish, the whole JJ at 2 or 3, because there was I don't know, maybe some rumblings like 2 weeks ago about, oh, maybe JJ could be ahead of May or ahead of this. And now I think that's kind of calmed down. And I think that's right. I mean, we saw the whole like Drake May, if he's not going 2, maybe JJ McCarthy goes 3. Like it almost feels like what we saw with CJ Stroud last year of like the talk of, oh, he's falling, no one likes him, but then he ends up going number 2 anyway. So I think that we're more in that stratosphere than like, Will Levis, where everyone thought he was top 5 for sure, and then he goes to the second round. Just because, which is crazy to think about. I mean, imagine at this point, like, a week after the draft, we look back and we see that either one of Drake May or Jaden Daniels goes in the second round. That's almost the equivalent, and that would be just shocking because they're so much better prospects than Levis was. So, yeah, it's crazy. Sorry, go for it. You have any extra thoughts?
No, good. Will Levis is forever deleted from my memory in terms of draft, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we're getting clowned in the chat here from Joe Curley, Will Levis number 2. Yep, I'm not going to lie, I played a little bit of Will Levis number 2. I thought that the logic made sense if they really didn't like CJ Stroud, and obviously that turned out completely wrong. But if we move to the 4th pick here, this is pretty interesting because I think that the 4th pick is picking up a little bit of steam here of the Cardinals potentially trading down with someone trading up for JJ McCarthy. We have the team like the Vikings and the Giants, both that I think are incredibly well positioned to take a guy like JJ McCarthy going forward specifically, and potentially trading up into that spot. Now the question is, are the Cardinals comfortable with trying to pull the same stunt that they did last year with Houston, and where they traded down and then traded back up to get Paris Johnson, a guy that we knew that they wanted. And now we assume that they want a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., who we've heard nothing but good things about that. I mean, Scott, where are you at with this? Because I feel like I've been pretty locked into Marvin Harrison Jr., but the more that we go through the process, like, it sounds crazy, but Arizona already did it last year. Like, if they can sign a deal if they can get a handshake deal with the Chargers at 5, who says that they can't go back to 12 and then back up to 5?
Yeah, in my first mock draft, we talked about it. I had Arizona trading with New York for New York to move up to get a quarterback. I think that's the only situation that would make sense. I think somebody's going to have to come in and overpay for that spot to go ahead and get there. 90% of mock drafts right now have Marvin Harrison Jr. as the pick there. I tend to agree with that. I'm of the opinion right now that the first 4 are locked in. I think that Arizona is going to sit there and force New England in a way to either take the quarterback and let Harrison drop, or if they let the quarterback drop, then they would go ahead and start to consider a move back. But I actually think that the Chargers are in more of a position to go ahead and move back right now. And I think some other teams may actually look at that as well. I just tend to think that Harrison's too clean of a prospect from what scouts and other people around the NFL are saying. You look at the need, it fits a need. So when you have both of those things lining up, I think Harrison's going to be the pick there at 4 unless a quarterback drops.
Yeah, are you in the same boat, VR?
Yeah, it's pretty well documented how much the Cardinals love Harrison. And JJ McCarthy right now is just the flavor of the week or the past couple weeks. And he's a quarterback, so you kind of have to buy it. And the quarterbacks always get drafted higher than they should, especially in a year like this where, like, the only scenario, honestly, I see it not being Marvin Harrison is the Cardinals trading out with, like, the Vikings for JJ McCarthy, which we did see JJ McCarthy's odds tumble, I think, this morning on the number 4 pick, where it was like 10-1 on FanDuel, and now I think it's 5-1 or 6-1, which, that could be just a couple people betting. That we probably know. So it's Marvin Harrison or a trade. I don't think it's anyone else.
Yeah, I think I know the people betting it. So yeah, we're looking at it was 15-1 this morning. I may or may not have put a little sprinkle, light misting on JJ McCarthy at number 4. I know that's for those of you who don't know, VR absolutely hates the word. We lost him. Hates the word sprinkle. He was so mad that we lost him through the process there. But yeah, we're looking at JJ McCarthy's odds plus 450 at Caesars to go number 4 overall, which is second behind. Let's see here if we can rotate everyone here in this box here. Welcome back, VR. So JJ McCarthy's odds plus 650 at FanDuel was like 15-1 this morning. Still 10-1 at BetMGM. I don't think that's that bad, to be honest, but I don't know. I guess it just comes down to how likely you think they are to trade the pick. But number 5 pick, the Chargers, I think that they almost have to trade. Like, We just saw Field Yates put out a mock and Mel Kiper put out a mock where they're taking J.C. Latham, number 5 overall, because he plays on the right side and is a great run blocker. He's the best run blocking part. I mean, taking him at number 5 with all the people who want to trade up seems pretty outrageous. I mean, Scott, are you kind of in the same boat there?
Yeah, I tend to think that, especially when you start looking at some of the moves they made here in free agency, that if they stay at 5, it's going to be a wide receiver. It's not going to be a tackle, just because we talked about the value of drafting a right tackle or a tackle that you project to play right tackle this high just doesn't make sense. So for me, unless it's Malik Neighbors, I think a trade out is going to make the most sense. I think we've talked about some of those teams that are going to be looking to move up for JJ McCarthy, and I think this is going to be the spot where you start to see it. It just starts to make the most sense. The way the Chargers want to build their team, and then Chargers have a few other spots where they can make some moves. You've seen Khalil Mack restructure. It's rumored that Bosa could be on the move as well. So the Chargers could end up, if Bosa gets moved, you can maybe see them get into the Dallas Turner type of area as well. But as of right now, I think it's wide receiver or trade out.
Yeah, well, I mean, they released Mike Williams, so I think that they're cap compliant. So technically, I don't think they have to do anything with any of the other superstars. So I kind of think that they're just going to stick. VR, any thoughts about what the Chargers do? I almost again, I know you hate talking trades, and I feel like you just rage quit on us when I talked about sprinkling. But are they going to trade or what? I feel like they almost have to, right?
I think it's right now, especially based off of free agency where Mike Williams is gone, Keenan Allen isn't a spring chicken anymore. I know they want to run the ball, and I know majority of mocks have them taking a tackle at 5. I see it being Neighbors as well. I mean, when Mike Williams went down last year, Keenan Allen was getting 100 targets a game, and they were crippled, essentially. Neighbors can fix that problem, even though we do know that they want to run the ball first. And, I mean, I guess Joe Alt, but are you taking Joe Alt as a right tackle?
Yeah.
He feels pretty strong on the left to me. The Latham at 5 is crazy. I think that was Kiper, like you said. And the one guy that it was Schrager. I want to say the Monday after the combine, Schrager was on Good Morning America or whatever the hell they call that show, and he was pumping Fuaga. And this is the season to butcher first and last names, but Fuaga he was pumping almost as if it was a consensus number 2 offensive line, and there was no question about it. And I thought that was very interesting. And if we're just throwing darts, I took Fuaga number 5, and it was 30-1 at the time. And it's come down, and that means absolutely nothing. But to me, it does feel like it's a wide receiver at 5. If they trade back, it would be a tackle. That would make a lot of sense. There's a bunch of elite right tackles in that range. That would be the perfect spot for the sizzling JJ McCarthy right now. But trading, I would love to know how often first-year head coaches trade the first-round pick. I have no idea how to figure that out, but
yeah, or
how often Harbaugh traded
and first-time GM. Their new GM is former Ravens player personnel guy Joe Horitz. So I wonder.
I do feel like first-year GMs, I feel like trade a lot more often than
the olds. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that I would say they're very likely to trade back, but I think you bring up a good point here. Another market with the Chargers too that we haven't really talked about. I think they're plus 250 to draft Blake Corum because obviously the Harbaugh connection. Just don't bet that. I mean, you can feel as confident as you want in the connection. I mean, that's a second, third round pick. I don't know. There's just so much else that can happen. I did take some flyers on teams that could use running backs, pre-free agency. I thought the Bengals and Giants were fine, but I think the Giants will still probably add someone else. I don't know if they're going to go into the season with just Devin Singletary as their guy. I mean, he's just not all that good, so that would kind of surprise me. But speaking of the Giants here at number 6, I think that they're squarely in play for a quarterback, and the more that we hear out of New York is the worse and worse Daniel Jones looks. They're worried about his health, if he gets injured again in 2024, he has like a clause in his contract where he gets paid all the 2025 money as well. I mean, I think that they kind of found out last year that he's not their guy, and they're just trying to move as quickly as possible. They signed Drew Lock to a short-term deal, and then they're in a good position at number 6 overall. If they wanted to swap with the Cardinals 4 to 6, that could make a lot more sense because the Cardinals are still in a position to get, Dunza, Neighbors, or even trade up to 5 again and then get their guy Marvin Harrison. So, VR, any thoughts about the Giants here, about they're going to go quarterback, wide receiver, or what they're going to do for this year?
Yeah, I think you've heard that they're in on JJ McCarthy, which at this time right now, it doesn't feel like JJ's going to fall. Like, it would be risky if they just hoped he fell to 6 with the Vikings behind them and I guess maybe the Broncos. I think quarterback is totally in play. I think if they get jumped, then it's definitely a wide receiver by, like, let's say the Vikings or whoever, and it just goes quarterback. Wide receiver would be a no-brainer, which getting Neighbors or Dunze would be a slam dunk. But I think QB is very alive. I don't think O-line, I think that's kind of fading. But yeah, QB is live at 6. I don't think they're going to trade up for him. That'd be crazy to me. I don't even know if they have the picks, but it would be JJ McCarthy or Neighbors to me.
Yeah, Scott, where are you at with this one?
So everything I've been tracking down on the Giants is that they are absolutely done with Daniel Jones. That they have severe buyer's remorse as far as like the contract goes. Even digging into Daniel Jones as far as like how his rehab is progressing right now, he's behind where he should be as far as progressing from his rehab is what I've heard. So I think the signing of Drew Lock is, hey, if we need somebody to spot start and get us through a season, I think Drew Lock is the guy that makes sense for that if they can't get a quarterback. I think 5 with the Chargers is definitely going to be the trade up spot. I think you look at Denver in particular and the moves that haven't gone on with Denver as far as being able to fill their quarterback vacancy. And I've heard that Sean Payton is desperate for either Drake May or JJ McCarthy, whichever one he can get in position to trade up to. You've seen absolutely no movement that would symbol anything that looks like a starter there in Denver. So I think Denver is actually the team that's a little bit more primed to move up at this point, whether it be to that 5 spot or not, to go ahead and get JJ McCarthy. And so I think the Giants are going to have to be in a position to go ahead and move up as well. I don't think they can sit there and rely on JJ McCarthy, but at the same time, if they do sit there, it's going to be a wide receiver.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's Denver. I mean, maybe we'll get to them a little bit later, but they just strike me as a team that could just do some like rogue shit, like just like go completely off the board, trade like their next 2 first-round picks to get up to like get JJ McCarthy or just something like outrageous. Because they don't really have a ton of draft capital or money given what happened with Russell Wilson, and they traded away, obviously a first for Sean Payton in previous year. So like, they're just not really in a good spot to make big moves like this, but we know that Sean Payton just is someone that makes big moves. So it's kind of that battle of what we're going to see. And personally, I don't know. I mean, VR, any thoughts on the Broncos this year? Because we'll just jump to them right now because I'm personally at a loss for what they're going to do if they don't land JJ McCarthy or someone interesting at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe Justin Fields, but yeah, I mean, it's the Bears, the Commanders, I was to call them the Redskins. And then you got the Vikings and the Broncos, and let's say the Giants are the 5 teams that are in on a quarterback. And there's really 4 quarterbacks that are probably first round worthy or top 10 worthy. So I honestly don't know how the Broncos could do it. They have to just trade like everything. But I mean, they don't have anyone right now. Like they just need bodies at this point on that quarterback. So I mean, they're definitely live. I mean, they were kind of like a month ago, everyone was just slotting JJ McCarthy at 12 or whoever at 12 because they just don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, it's crazy how
really just either of them. But the good thing is, like usually trades are going to create chaos, and it like creates a ripple effects in terms of like what we're seeing on the mock drafts. Like them trading up, like everyone is already projecting the same guys going really to the top 10. depending on what team it is, it's not going to create a ripple effect that I think we've seen in years past, really, because we really know what teams are going to be trading up, at least hopefully.
Yeah, I wonder if it would be another. I guess like if the Giants or not the Giants, the Broncos or Vikings, like if they were to trade up to 4, hypothetically say Cardinals are selling, would it be a draft day trade? Like would it just immediately mess up all the mocks? Because I mean, it would probably have to be, right? I know 1 through 3 is going to be a quarterback, but at the same time, like, would you be able to risk like multiple firsts to get up to 4 if somehow something goes wrong with the quarterback you want not being there? I don't know if they could. So it would probably be a draft day trade, I think. I don't think we'd see anything super early. So it's a little bit tough, honestly. I think that it's one of those drafts where we kind of expect it, but I think it's better off just like we're going to be able to attack in the betting markets, but mock drafts are just going to probably be messed up because teams are going to trade up to JJ McCarthy. So,
yeah, and I mean, normally you hear like teams want to make these trades that are like big in like the top 5 as early as possible so they can do their due diligence so they already know. But I mean, JJ McCarthy is just the flavor of the week the last 2 weeks. And is a team really willing, or is a team really that confident that he's going to go in the top 5 to trade into the top 5 right now? Or is he somewhat of a gray area where you don't need to trade right now? Maybe you hope he falls to 6 or 7 because that's going to cost a lot less than trading into 4. So I don't think he's that bona fide top 5 guy that you have to trade for now. I think you can probably wait.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then while we're doing, mid-show here, we'll skip the Titans briefly because we have the Falcons making a trade. They traded away mid-show Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore to the Cardinals. So honestly, I think it kind of makes sense for them. I think that they, were still squarely in play to take a wideout at 8. Even with signing Darnell Mooney, because then you're looking at like London, Pitts, Mooney, which is a really good core. But I mean, they've literally, Terry Fontenot came out as GM in 2021 and has taken Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London in 3 consecutive years. So, I mean, maybe just go, quadruple down. But now we're looking at Rondale Moore being, I would say, a reasonable 4th option in that offense. So I don't really think they're going to go wide out at 8. I mean, Scott, your thoughts about the same there, it looks like?
Yeah, we've talked about this in past shows, but I think this is squarely where you're going to see Dallas Turner. I think them solidifying Kirk Cousins at quarterback, having the weapons they do. They added Mooney in it, and now another piece. I think this is where they go defense and try to solidify that side of the ball and get an edge rusher, which is something they've struggled with over the past few years, just trying to piece in guys, via free agency that haven't necessarily panned out. So I think with what Dallas Turner did at the combine, his testing, his explosive numbers, I think this is squarely the place where you start to see him. And I know we're skipping over to Titans, but we even had discussions a little bit with a little bit of edge. Maybe Dallas Turner gets up to Tennessee. They got Ridley. So there's some options here. I think Turner comes into play here at 7 and 8.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's go back to the Titans real quick. I bet and released to our subscribers Titans to go D-line or edge at 11-1 yesterday morning. Got pretty lucky there considering they signed Calvin Ridley for $90 million. Shout out to Pretty Ricky, by the way. He's some random Twitter guy who's been tweeting all this stuff out. I think he works with like an agent or something like that. My guess would be one of those people because he's had some scoops now on like 5 or 6 guys, like way ahead of time. So good follow if you want some stuff there. Who knows how long this run will last. And I hope that he's not just using this goodwill to absolutely destroy us during draft season because I am all aboard the Pretty Ricky boat. Like I'm just all in and bet more and more Titans D-line edge as soon as he was reporting that there was a division rival that was in play for Calvin Ridley. The Titans are really interesting because they have Andre Dillard still under contract, a left tackle. He was absolutely horrible. There's rumors that he's going to get cut and would be a post-June 1 designation, but they haven't marked him as such. And we're still days into free agency, and they could easily just be like, he's a post-June 1 cut, and they would save the same cap-wise. Like, I think that they're in play still with $50 million in cap room to potentially sign Tyron Smith. I think they're in play to take an offensive lineman like a Joe Alt at 7. But I also think that they could take an edge. We saw Ron Carthon, their GM, has worked in San Francisco in the past, worked in, is the new Titans GM as of last year. He's drafted 3 defensive linemen, 2 offensive linemen, and Trey Lance in his drafts as an executive with either San Francisco or now average relative athletic score, which is RAS, was like over 9, and both Dallas Turner and Jared Verse are like 9.3. So I think that both those guys fit the mold. Like San Francisco is literally building the whole house out of pass rushers for like the last decade. So would it surprise me to see them, who has like aging pass rushers and lost to Nico Autry in free agency, to draft a Dallas Turner? Not at all. So I think that is still interesting at like plus 300, which is what it's at now. But it's tough to ignore. Like some free agent moves can happen here, I think, in the next, I don't know, day or so with Eric Armstead and maybe even Tyron Smith that could like kind of tip their hand on which way they're going to go in the first round for the Titans. VR, any thoughts on the Titans here at 7?
There's a couple O-line free agents still out there that can really change things, specifically with like the Titans or the Jets as well, whether it's Tyron Smith or Bakhtari or however how you pronounce the last name. There's some twists and turns that can be created with what O-linemen are still out there. I think everyone kind of jumped the bandwagon on when the Cardinals released whoever they did yesterday, and then they came back and signed Jonah Williams right after. But I tailed you a little. I tailed you on that Titans pick for not as much as I should have, and I went to go replace it when I saw that Ridley trade.
Yeah,
and DraftKings was quote unquote reviewing my bet, and naturally, as they were reviewing, they decided to pull it, which is great. But yeah, I think you're on point there. That was phenomenal. I think that's like legitimate CLV too. Like I don't think that was just people betting. Like that Ridley trade was, I don't want to say it was lucky because it definitely was. It was perfect timing.
Yeah, for sure.
But I wish I did more.
Yeah, no, it's
and that like pushes these wide receivers up too. So if, let's say JJ goes 4 or 5, all of a sudden you have Neighbors and Odunze at 8, which we're assuming that neither are going to go 8, and then you have Neighbors and Odunze at 9 for the Bears. Then you would hope to God that they take one of those two. And Odunze, let's just say, keeps falling. There's a ripple effect with that Ridley signing for sure.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, it's such a good news for the Bears because now they're literally in perfect position to get a wide receiver without having to trade up. I thought they were going to have to trade up to 5. I heard before this whole Ridley thing that they were a team to watch for it, trading up to 5 specifically. But because Falcons probably not picking a wide out. Titans, they have DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, and Calvin Ridley now. Like, they could pick a wide out, but I don't know. It seems like they already got a ton of investment there. They're looking at already Hopkins and Ridley, paying a good chunk of change too. So, yeah, I would be kind of surprised if it was a wide receiver at this point. Scott, any thoughts on 7 or 8? I guess we already talked about the Falcons specifically here. I guess we'll move to the Bears. Like, I think that they're probably a wide receiver trade down team if for some reason they don't like one of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. Odunze strikes me as like a perfect fit for the Bears, given like his character and everything he does, a little bit bigger. I don't know. I think he would be a perfect match for them, with Caleb Williams. Any Bears thoughts about any other position maybe?
Yeah, I think Chicago is I think they're in a good spot in this draft. One of the interesting discussions that I heard was that if Chicago didn't have the number 1 pick, would they be in the quarterback quarterback discussions right now? And I don't think they would, but I think whenever you have a player like Caleb Williams there at 1, you go ahead and do it and reset that quarterback salary cap. But yeah, I think in this position right here, I think they're in a good position where if they want to trade up, if they're that high on one of the wide receivers, whether it be Odunze or Neighbors, I think they're in a spot where they're actively, like a team that could go ahead and move up to get one of the wide receivers that they want, especially if they're going to go ahead and have Caleb Williams there. They've made some good moves here in free agency. One of the things you've seen some mock drafts with kind of, having Chicago as maybe a fallback option for like Brock Bowers if all 3 of the wide receivers aren't there. I think that's absolutely out the door, especially with Gerald Everett there signing as the backup tight end. So like Brock Bowers is definitely off the board, but I think they're in a position where they have a lot of options. I think if the board falls the way we're kind of talking about, I think Odunze makes a lot of sense there. I don't see them passing up on one of those guys. And if all the wide receivers off the board, they could go ahead and be another team that might be willing to go ahead and trade down and get some more draft capital. Or they could, outside chance to go ahead and address the tackle position, just take the best player available. So Chicago's I think things shaping up nicely for Chicago and their fans and what they're going to do in this draft right now. If I had to bet, I think it's going to be that they want to end up targeting one of these top 3 wide receivers, and whether that wide receiver falls to them at 9 or if they make a small move up to get the guy that they want, I think that's what's going to end up happening.
Yeah. Side note, I'm going to be betting the Bears to make the playoffs. I think I've said it every single episode, and I'm going to keep saying it until they release the market because I'm pumped. Caleb, DJ Moore, good defense last year, second half of the year. So I'm excited. It'll be a tough road to the playoffs with the Lions in division and the Packers seemingly, getting the next Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. But I think it's certainly viable, and I'm excited to see what the odds are at. But I think that was a good segue into the Brock Bowers conversation. Luke, where are you at on Bowers? Because I'm looking at your sheet, which, by the way, for all the listeners, go by Luke's draft betting sheet. Has all the best mocks on there, range, player to team stuff. It's truly one of the best resources if you're actually serious about betting the NFL draft. Even if you're not, it's cheap enough that one bet will pay off with this. So I think it's, very, very valuable. But we're looking at Brock Bowers' range here. The highest people have him going is 5, which was a pretty early popular kind of destination. But now it's kind of lost a lot of steam, and I think for good reason. But the high is 21. Where are you on that spectrum, and do you think there's any room to fall even more?
He's kind of been the landmine in terms of depending on where he goes, it's going to really shape up what happens after. Where 5 is completely out of the question. I think he was the consensus pick at 5 for a while, but you've gradually seen that basically lose all steam whatsoever. I did see it was Tony Pauline had his piece come out this morning, and he was speaking to Bowers because they just had their pro day. And he said 12 is his ceiling. He's not getting past 12. And I don't know if that was specifically because of the Broncos or what, but right now in stations out of Vegas, they actually opened up some over-unders. I want to say last week, they were first to market. It was honestly just great seeing over-unders. And they opened it up at 16.5, which kind of tells you, I guess, the perception of him, which you were seeing mocks in the 20s. I don't see him getting his 20s. If I lived in Vegas, I probably would have bet the under right away. And since then, they've pulled it. He's not even listed on stations anymore. But that seemed too high. And he is just the landmine that it's just the position value. You really have no idea. And where he goes is really going to tell us what happens after that. I think the Jet right now, if I was to make a mock, I'd probably put the Jets at 10.
Okay. Yeah, and that's my issue with the Jets in general is because Aaron Rodgers is so old and so just we're going to win now with him, do they want to invest in Bowers as a long-term guy? Do they think that he's good enough to be a startable player right away and come and make an impact? I think he probably is, but especially what we just saw with Laporta come in and just be a baller from day one. Maybe the whole narrative of tight ends need time to develop is kind of out the window, but at the same time, it honestly kind of depends on how Aaron Rodgers feels about that, and I have no idea how Aaron Rodgers feels. So that's what I worry about with a skill player here. Maybe he doesn't want a rookie. Maybe he's just gonna. They should honestly trade their first round pick for just a player, an average player that is, going to come in, start, and make Rodgers happy. Because, we all know it's his team at this point. So, Scott, any Bowers thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Bowers to the Jets is where it does start to come into play. They recently just traded for Morgan Moses. They've kind of locked up 4 or 5 of their offensive line spots. So you're going to have Tippmann and Vera Tucker, who gets to move back inside and play his natural position of guard. And then they John Simpson, they signed from Baltimore and traded for Morgan Moses, who's also was with Baltimore. So it's either left tackle or you could see them going Bowers. I think left tackle makes the most sense for them as far as trying to protect Aaron Rodgers. But I think Bowers is the earliest he starts to come in play is there with the Jets. I still think that depending upon what type of free agency moves, I think just tackle, especially left tackle, is going to be a much more higher priority there for the Jets. And look, I think that coaching staff and possibly their GM are are drafting and coaching this year for jobs. I think if things fail this year with the Jets, you could see that whole thing just blown up. But they do still have some young pieces with Garrett Wilson. So it's one of those things where I think having Bowers at 10 is more of a luxury pick for a team that's not in a position to make a luxury pick.
And I mean, I think you're that Twitter guy that you love. I don't know, what's it like, Pickney or whatever that?
Pretty Ricky, yeah.
Pretty
what
Ricky?
about
I
him?
think he said something about Tyron Smith with the Jets. It was either yesterday or this morning.
Interesting. So, okay, so then if he's saying that, I mean, maybe there's a way to pivot here. So we're looking at the Jets' first pick market because, I mean, Pretty Ricky don't miss. Like, he's like 10 for 10 so far. So we're looking at Jets odds right now. Minus 260 O-line, plus 350 wideout, plus 550 tight end, 10-1 D-line edge, 35-1 corner. I mean, they probably don't need a corner. Like linebacker, quarterback, safety, running back, kicker. Okay, so none of that. They're not taking any of those. I mean, there probably won't be a wideout left, right? If Chicago's picking, Giants or, Chargers are probably going to have the second of Marvin Harrison.
Like, that's the thing. Like, if it goes, like, if JJ goes in the top 5.
Yeah.
I mean, right now there's like a certified, let's say 8 guys in the top 10, maybe 9 if you want to include JJ. Where if all has to go, and let's say JJ goes top 5, and Neighbors makes it to the Bears because the Falcons and the Titans don't need a wide receiver anymore, Dunze could be there for the Jets at 10, which, I mean, I think that would be a slam dunk. Like, who else do they have? Garrett Wilson and
nothing.
Like no
Alan
one.
Lazard.
I mean, if Dunze fell to 10, I would hope to God that they would take him. I haven't seen one mock with the Dunze to the Jets, so that just popped into my head and thought about it because all these free agent moves feel like they've pushed Neighbors and Dunze down potentially.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. So it's like if that happens. Yeah. I mean,
I think corner is actually in play.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. When you look at it, you've got Sauce Gardner. Everybody knows how good he is, but can you even name the other 2 corners that they have starting right now?
I mean, they still have DJ Reed, right?
Yeah, it's DJ Reed and Michael Carter. And I mean,
Reed's good. You don't like Reed?
Yeah, Reed's pretty good.
Carter's
they drafted D-line last year, and you hear about you hear that they missed who do they want? They wanted there's no running back that they could ever take right now. But didn't the Lions jump them for Gibbs?
Yeah.
And they took McDonald instead, which
to
me
they went on
positions, like D-line would make the most sense because they just lost that guy to the Eagles. But they just took McDonald. And I know McDonald's old, and I don't know how he played last year. He seemed like he didn't even play whatsoever.
Well, they just signed Javon Kinlaw, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I like this path, though. So really a wide receiver plus 350, tight end plus 550, D-line edge is 10-1. So, like, I mean, corner's 35-1.
Like Jared Verse maybe at 10.
Right, because he's in that range. I mean, I think the Bowers stuff could make sense. Like if Odunze is not there, like I just don't know, like what else are they going to do? Like trade back? I mean, Rodgers would probably just quit and start his presidential campaign at that point. I mean, it's like they're not trading back. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting conversation though. Something to look for sure. Like pay attention. I think these are like the moves that if we pay attention to free agent moves, you can probably get value on this before they take it off the board at certain books because I mean, things are going to shift based on like what they're doing, especially if they get Tyron Smith. Like if they get Tyron Smith, obviously O-line shouldn't be minus 260. So there's definitely some value elsewhere. Let's see here. Talked about Jets, talked about Bears. Yeah, I think that there's the next picks to look at is like kind of this grouping of like Vikings and Broncos, but we think they both might be squarely in play to trade up. We talked about that a little bit. If they stand pat, I have truly no idea what either of them are going to do. I think that they're both like so into the quarterback conversation and they both need a lot of help in other places that like, I think they could really just be wild cards to pick anyone. But this, like the 13 through 15 with like Raiders, Saints, Colts, I think are squarely in play for guys like Quinnen Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, kind of like the first corners to come off the board. Scott, like any thoughts about the corners here, like where they go? I know there's been some hype about Quinyon, maybe even skipping Dallas Turner, but at this point, it seems like he's probably like a 7 or 8 guy instead of a early teens guy.
So two things of note. One, I think Minnesota signing Sam Darnold is important because it puts them in a position to where they have enough flexibility to go ahead and give Darnold a year to go ahead and start if the price is too high to move up or if somebody jumps them. So I think they're flexible because they also went ahead and addressed the edge position through free agency. So I think it puts them in a position where, like, if they miss out on quarterback, they're not necessarily just stuck like say Denver is. So I think Denver is going to be more aggressive, even though they have less assets to want to go ahead and move up. Talking about the corners, I have heard a little bit about Quinyon Mitchell possibly being the first one. He aced everything at the combine interview process, athleticism, big. He's got some tape against, I think, Marvin Harrison Jr. The other thing that I've been hearing, though, is that Byron Murphy is getting a lot of praise within the scouting community and NFL circles to actually be the second defensive player off the board. So I think there's a possibility you could see him jump these cornerbacks and even like another edge like Jared Verse and be the second defensive player off the board. He aced everything at the combine, looked like a Greek god from what they said at weigh-ins and everything, and looked really fluid for how big and how muscled up he is within the positional drills. You start looking at some of the defensive tackles and how the NFL's kind of transitioning to wanting to have more interior pass rush rather than just getting it off the edge. And I think he's a guy that's going to be valued maybe a little bit more than what some of these cornerbacks are.
No, that definitely makes sense. That's a good riser. I think I have him in my newest mock going in like the late teens. We're looking at his range on VR sheet 8 to 23. Someone had him at looks like our guy Charlie Campbell at Walter Football had him at 8. He's always a wild card though. His mocks are always a little fun, especially early on.
But they're the best. So it's like tough to argue, but they definitely have a couple wild cards, and you can already see who Walt has in terms of like his red flags. Like some guy from like, who are they?
Yeah, Jackson Powers, he didn't have him in the first round. Amarius Mims, 31.
Chris Jenkins. He's had Chris Jenkins in the first round for a while. Michael Hall out of Ohio State, he's had in the first round, going like 17. And then he just stands by him. Like he finally pushed JJ into like the top 10, which he had him, I don't even think, going in the first for a while.
Yeah, he also doesn't even have Chop Robinson in the first either. And I think Chop's kind of a lock to be a first round pick, but
yeah, I mean, Chop was kind of like cold, and then he's definitely picked up steam since the combine. But like looking at I think like one of the most valuable exercises like I go through, and especially with my sheet, is I really take like Jeremiah and Brugler's like big boards, and then I compare it to the athletic consensus, and you kind of like cross-reference the two between like who do Jeremiah and Brugler like rank higher than what the consensus is, relatively speaking. And usually that can somewhat imply like teams are higher on this guy if those two have him ranked a lot higher than the consensus. And right now, Byron Murphy, like it's not a big discrepancy, but guys like Verse, like they're a little bit higher on. And I put Zerline in there because McShay isn't with ESPN anymore, and I hope he puts out a mock in rankings. But figuring out like Chop, Chop is a big discrepancy between the two, and that's kind of where you can figure out like who's going to go earlier than what the mocks are predicting and who teams are that are higher than like, let's say, the media or the public. And I think honestly, Byron Murphy is one of those guys.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, no, that's a good call here. And we have a question here, and I'll kick it back to Scott here then. Who's a specific player that you're really waiting for their draft position / matchup market to show up?
I think once we start looking at these top 3 wide receivers coming off, I think Brian Thomas is a lock to be like the number 4 wide receiver. He's the guy that I think you can kind of start placing, to see which teams need wide receiver. They're still going to need a few things to play out through free agency. But he's another guy that I think is just rising up draft boards. I think his numbers could have been way out of control if Malik Neighbors wasn't there. So I don't think it's necessarily a situation where his stats are being propped up by Jaden Daniels, but it's that, his stats have been held back a little bit by just having another alpha there at LSU on the opposite side of him. In a couple of games that Neighbors didn't play, he actually absolutely balled out. You're talking about a guy that's like 6'3", 210, ran a 4.33 at the combine. He's a guy that's getting a lot of steam with the scouting community, and I think he's a guy that can go higher than what a lot of mocks will have him at right now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I mean, there's 0 over-unders right now, so I mean, it's that would be great to have just any in general would be awesome. But Luke, anyone you're curious about and you're waiting for?
I'm waiting for like second or third offensive lineman drafted, because right now it could be like 8 or 9 offensive linemen in the first round, and they're really outside of like Alt being like the consensus number one. Like depending on who you look at, it's going to be a different order of like rankings for offensive linemen every single time. And I do think like the quote unquote value can really be had in the offensive line market, especially like the second offensive lineman taken or the third, and even the over-unders, where I really don't think, and I think we're going to get a better idea as we get closer. But like some of them are only right tackles. Guys like Fashano, people are assuming it's going to be a left tackle. There's just going to be, there really is no certainty on the order of these offensive linemen and how they're going to go. And I think that's going to create some fun numbers in those markets, and even the over-unders. I've historically, some of like the most painful over-unders I've lost have been offensive linemen, but like this year feels, I mean, if 9, the average is, well, I have the average like 5 or 6 per year, and we're looking at 9 right now. I think I saw a mock that had 9.
The one thing I'll piggyback. The one thing that I'll piggyback on with the offensive lineman is this is a spot where you really have to do your research. And it's not just looking at the draft rankings and saying, well, I think it's going to be this offensive lineman or this offensive lineman. These offensive lines run different schemes, whether it's power gap, whether, what it is. And you have to start digging into some of these evaluations and some of the, stuff that a lot of the people in the scouting community are doing to see whether or not that offensive lineman, especially if it's going to be a tackle, if he's a left tackle versus a right tackle, if he's a tackle that they're projecting that's going to have to kick inside, some of those things, like everything that I've read on Latham is that he is a right tackle only. As much as he wants to be a left tackle and as much as his agent's trying to pump it up, he's going to be drafted as a right tackle. And, you just have to start looking at some of these breakdowns and evaluations in the scouting community to kind of match up these tackles to what these offensive lines and what these offensive coordinators, what kind of schemes they actually run. I think that's one of the things that's a little bit undervalued here in the mock draft community and trying to peg some of these offensive linemen to specific teams.
Yeah, like basically like the Jets signing Moses yesterday is a right tackle, and we're assuming they're going, if they don't sign someone like Tyron Smith, that they're going to be drafting like a specific type of left tackle. And if you're looking at like the second offensive line taken and you think the Jets are going to be that team that takes them, you can probably cancel or cross out guys like Latham because he's just assuming he's a right tackle. Aaron Rodgers they're all in on 1 year. So they're probably going to be drafting a ready left tackle. You would assume, you would hope. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be, someone who's a little bit more of a project. That definitely makes sense there. We got Himothy Chalamet in the chat. Also, I watched Dune last night. Pretty good movie. Dune 2. It was a solid flick. He said, nothing wrong with a little artificial CLV on Tenny, except for the fact it means absolutely nothing. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's nothing worse than LCLV, like losing closing line value, like getting a bunch of closing line value and then still losing. But it happens all the time. So it always makes you feel good.
It's the best. Yeah. I mean, we all know it's artificial, but it's the best. And I mean, I don't think it means absolutely nothing because the Ridley move meant something in regards to that bet. That was an actual, you placed that bet before you knew they were going to sign Ridley or trade for Ridley. And they got Ridley, and it definitely moved based off of that.
Yeah, no, 100% there. Awesome. Well, that's about all that I had for today's show. I mean, still found a way to go through 55 minutes without talking about a mock draft or anything. Anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we hop off here? Good. Awesome. Sweet. Cool. Well, appreciate you guys all hanging out. Appreciate the questions. Hopefully we'll be back doing this with Noonan next week. So, appreciate you guys all hanging out. VR, thanks for coming on as always. And, Scott, we will chat soon. I'm sure have some more heated discussions offline about Drake May versus Jaden Daniels. Sweet. All right. Well, catch you guys next week. Bye.